All right, welcome to the Unbroken Ground, Season 2, Episode 43, the final episode. As I mentioned last week, this is it for the weekly format of doing the podcast this way. There will still be some Unbroken Ground podcasts that'll come out, but mostly it'll be when I gather with friends and able to just kind of make those. It won't be a weekly every week kind of thing anymore. Instead, I've already launched another creative project called Stats Are for Losers. You can find that on Spotify or YouTube. It's an Unbroken Ground production, but it is all about stats, and it's going to be about sports stats. Right now, of course, football is big. So the first one is on football, so you can check that out. But there'll still be some, keep your eyes open for some Unbroken Ground podcasts. They'll still be out there, but they won't come weekly anymore. Let's do a final podcast. The last one. I think usually things like this, you do like a retrospective or you look back at things, and maybe that is in store. But yeah, I think that the whole heart behind doing the podcast was just it was something that I had not ever done. And I always kind of had that as an idea of like, oh, this would be something fun to do. And for me, it was at a time of my life when I was working in kind of a transition period of what I was doing at work. And there wasn't a whole lot of, at times, mental challenge or really a lot of challenging things for me because I was working in a new department, and I was doing a role that had some lighter expectations on it. And so I began to kind of get antsy about like wanting to kind of challenge myself to do things and do new things. And so, it's one of those things of like on a lark, which is how I do most things with creativity. It was like, yeah, I'll do a podcast. And how hard can it be? And honestly, I started it. And I did an episode. One of my good friends was leaving the camp that he was working for. He was going to another camp, and I went to basically his goodbye party at a church, and that's where I got the name for the very first episode, which was on a donkey to Babylon, which is what his daughter. They were doing a retelling of or what the kids knew about the Christmas story, and that was one of the first episode, and so that's why there was that title. And it was like, I'll just record an episode. And I recorded it on probably one of the worst. I did it. I started on Audacity, which is what I still do it on, but I recorded it with a very bad microphone. Had very poor sound quality. I had to learn some things about how to equalize my sound out. So I apologize to people who listened to me in early days and got to hear. I talked my voice was very soft, and then the music came on and blew the speakers out. And so, and even scared some people. So I apologize for that. I hope that the sound quality has been better and that I have got better at mixing things and made a better product. Now I have a fancy microphone extension thing with a screen on it to keep all the hisses and the sounds out as much as possible. So we've really kind of upgraded a bit, but yeah, the idea behind it was just kind of this creative outlet, and part of the time, and this, it's been 2 years. That's just crazy to think about. But part of the time I was trying to figure out what it was or how I could best serve God with the talents that I had. And one of the ways that I had been doing that has been able to speak and preach and do those things. And I just wasn't having that outlet anymore. We were going to, a bigger church where that was not something that I was really getting to do. And so instead, I started saying, well, what would it look like if I did a weekly podcast? And that where I kind of did an expository, just impromptu kind of sermon on whatever God was kind of laying on my heart at that time, and so the podcast was born, and wanted to call it the Unbroken Ground because I think that, and I still think that there was a lot of area in theology and Christian circles that we push far to the edges, and we tend to pull away from people rather than to pull towards people. And that ground in the middle, that unbroken ground where we could do some work and plow together and get to see some fruits of our unity. I think those are places that we still need to head towards, and we still need that. And so that's why that was kind of the original idea, and calling it the unbroken ground, kind of the ground that, just that conservatives would just kind of cartoonishly characterize liberals, and liberals would, cartoonishly characterize conservatives, and they would both think that the other one was just wrong and just, either dumb or just severely mistaken, or in their sin. They were dull to the Holy Spirit even, and there's just there's more to it than that. There's more of that middle ground that we should walk, that we were going to walk in, and that. So that was kind of the whole idea. The point behind the podcast was to just kind of explore some of those themes. I man, I said a whole bunch of stuff, and then I realized that that the program had stopped recording and was spinning, and I don't remember what I said before. So thankfully, the podcast has been mostly technologically free of a lot of bugs. There's been a few things, but that was the first for that. So back to, I think I may have gone on for like several minutes before I noticed it stopped. So what I want to say is that was the point, the idea behind the podcast, and so I'm honored that anybody would listen to it. If you've listened to it from just one episode, or if you listen to many episodes, if you listen to all the episodes, and you've listened to more episodes than I have, of course, I'm here when I'm making them, but they are, but yeah, there are things that I've tried to, get the sound quality that's well. I have enjoyed. It's always been a joy to make these. It's always been a great creative outlet, and even there are times when it was tiring. It's been, there are episodes where I know that I basically lose my train of thought because I'm falling asleep because I'm so tired. But I was like, oh, I want to get this out. And yeah, it's been a ritual that for me to be able to do that every Sunday night. Usually, there's been a few times I taped one early to send out because I wouldn't be here on the Sunday night, and but yeah, it's been kind of this fun journey. So if you've been with me, I'm honored that you would listen to more than one, or even one. And I hope that it's driven you to really be encouraged in your walk with Jesus, and to ask questions about your walk with Jesus. Like, that's kind of the goal. I mean, again, I may have said this earlier, but I think it's so fitting that the last two episodes are like, what do you want to be known for? And I kind of knew I was headed this way. And so it's like, what is it that you want to be known for? And for me, it is definitely, do I love God with everything that I have? And do I love people like I would love myself? And if I'm doing that, then I do think other things will work out. I, you know, if you've listened to any of this podcast and you know that I have more questions than I have answers, you know that I have, opinions about the way the world is and the way the kind of the people around me that I live in the amidst, and even those that I don't, those that I visit with through be able to cyber world and those things like that. Like I have, I probably start as I work through my thoughts. I actually come up with more questions than I have answers for. That I come up with. I just things that make me want to dig deeper and dive deeper into who Jesus is and who Jesus wants us to be, and it's the outlet of doing the podcast has been for me one of growth. Just have to have that weekly discipline of thinking and talking about God and Jesus and the Bible and questions and Christianity and how to follow that and how to live that, and also just have a disciplined weekly thing that I did to produce that weekly. Whether it was high quality all the time. Again, obviously there were times I was falling asleep. Probably not. But it's been enjoyable, and I hope that you've listened and enjoyed it as well. I hope that that if you found ones that you were particularly touched or moved by, that you'll listen to them many times because the podcast is going to stay out there. I'm just not going to have weekly updates anymore. So again, I'm honored. Even if you're just listening to this for the first time, I'm honored that you would allow me to speak into your life as much or as little as you've allowed that. I appreciate that you would at least hear me out. Let me ask my questions. Let me push against some of your thoughts. Let me challenge you. I hope there was a podcast at least throughout all of the ones that I made that did a little bit of that for you, that made you dive deeper into your relationship with God because you had questions too, or maybe it encouraged you because you had questions and you were afraid that maybe asking questions was going to get you on the wrong side of God and the wrong side of the church, and so being able to listen and to ask those questions, you found freedom in that, and I hope I hope for that. I think that would be just the challenge is where do you go from here? Obviously, you can listen again to all my podcasts. Not that they're that interesting or one that you really want to listen to them more than once. I don't. But that you would find other sources to find discipleship and to find people that challenge you there's books, there's podcasts, they're all out there. And if you're anything with sports and stats, then I invite you to my next project. It's kind of one of those things that I started this podcast because I wanted to keep into the rhythm of doing a weekly talk on Jesus. So in case God kind of pulled me back into doing some preaching somewhere, I was continuing to stay prepared. But now I'm fine. I'm spending a lot of time looking at stats and finding fun things with that and practicing some of the skills that I'm going to school for. And so, so I'm making a video podcast. Stats are for losers. I tell the story a little bit in the first episode of Stats is for Losers. So, but why do I call it that? It's a funny title. It's a tongue-in-cheek title because the statement is said by head coaches when they're making a decision and it's going against the grain, or it doesn't necessarily doesn't muster up to statistical analysis. But they're going to make that decision anyway. And so kind of the idea is that it's great to have stats, but your gut or your instinct or your experience may be a better thing to listen to. And so a head coach, in this case, Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, this year, they are doing better than expected, I guess I should say. And they started the year with one quarterback named Justin Fields, because the other quarterback named Russell Wilson was hurt. And when Russell got well enough to start again, Tomlin said, "Hey, Russell's starting again," even though Fields had played probably good enough to be in consideration for the starter, even if he wasn't going to keep that role. And so, in order to avoid all of the questions and the stat heads saying like, well, hold on here, Justin Fields has shown he can do this. Why are we putting Russell Wilson in? And so Tomlin used the line, and it's not his line, and it's, Belichick has used it. But it goes back apparently all the way to the 1900s, where a head coach was asked about some stats that were good after losing a game, and so he was like, stats are for losers and assistant coaches. And so, tongue-in-cheek, I'm doing a podcast that's going to talk about stats, but it's called Stats Are for Losers, and it's tongue-in-cheek though, because it is kind of a poking fun of the idea that there is a world where just gut instinct or intuition would somehow be better than using stats. I would agree that stats can't tell us everything. They can't give us all the answers. We do eventually have to make a decision based on the stats. But having more information and more stats often is more helpful. So that's the idea behind the new project, is talking about sports and stats and doing displays of video podcasts. You can find that on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube. The first episode is out. I talk about whether or not the Washington Commanders are legit, and I did that before today's game. I'm actually doing this podcast after today's game, and they won the game excitingly in last second with a very lucky Hail Mary, which I had predicted that they would lose the game today, but honestly, if you watch the game, they should have really dominated. But anyway, that's not really this podcast. That's the new creation, and already you can tell how that's bleeding over. So if you like sports, you want to hear about stats in sports, check that out. I'll be doing, I won't be talking about God, won't be challenging in that way, but it'll still be a fun thing to listen through. Hopefully it'll be enjoyable enough that you'll just tune into that as well. You won't find it on Podbean. You'll find it in, again, Spotify and or YouTube, because it is a video, because the stats I talk about I put on the screen, so you don't just have to try to catch them in your brains. So yeah, that's it. That's it. A final thank you, I guess. Again, if you've listened through all of this rambling and even the technical difficulties that I had, and you've listened to all the episodes and you've been a faithful listener, I thank you. I honestly don't know the majority of people who do listen, and there's not a ton of people who listen to the podcast. I'm not trying to pretend like there's a huge audience. There's not. There's enough. It makes me proud to realize that every episode has been downloaded at least 7 to 8 times, many more. Excuse me. And I hope that brings, like I said, encouragement, challenge to be more like Jesus, to challenge yourself to think deeper, and then it makes you better at doing what I said in the last 2 episodes, which is loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and loving others as yourself. That if anything in that, if there's even just a small part that this podcast has played or continues to play, then I am eternally grateful for that, because it is more than I could hope for, expect, and definitely more than I deserve. It's only by the grace of God that I'm able to even to say the things I'm able to say, and it's only through His Spirit and His power that it'll speak to your hearts. And so I'm thankful that you've tuned in with this journey with me. Again, there'll be future episodes with friends. They won't be the single take episodes that I do every Sunday, but they'll be out there once or twice a month. There'll be new episodes up, and then, of course, somewhere along that same frequency, you can go listen to Stats Are for Losers if you miss hearing my voice, which I don't know why you would. But again, thank you for listening. Thank you for walking with me on this journey. For those that have stayed here a long time, or those who have just started and are going to go back and listen maybe to pick out your favorite ideas, or thanks for being here. And so I pray that you guys would chase God with everything you have, that you would love Him with all your heart, mind, and soul, and you would love others as you love yourself. And that you would think back on some of the words I said when you need them most. That God would be a comfort, and that you would be encouraged and continue to be encouraged by the things you've heard through this podcast. That's it. Fellow travelers, signing off.